Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. Good morning. Thank you. It is a good morning. I'm excited to have this conversation with my friends and colleagues, David and Terry. I was introduced to them by Walter Isaacson, the founding father of Bookfest, noted historian, author, genius at large. Walter said to me, "You got to meet these two guys. We're interested in journalism. That's the world we live in. In New Orleans, these two are royalty." Now you laugh. I smirked a little bit too, but Sir, but Sir Walter was quite serious about it, and I came to understand why. Baquet and Francis are two celebrated names in the hood, in many hoods in this town, in the city of New Orleans, and it's an interesting moment for us to be talking together, particularly in this space that is, I think, described as the Times-Picayune NOLA.com stage. So these guys have been on this stage in some form or fashion all over the city of New Orleans. They led, Terry on the editorial side, David on the publishing side for many, many years, those distinguished journalism centers, NOLA.com in particular, which is when the beginning of the digital landscape in news transformed itself. We'll get to that a little bit later. But first, let me start with you, David, on this. Just give us a little bit of your roots, the Francis roots in New Orleans.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming and allowing us to share our vision, and hopefully you will understand what we do and maybe help us engage in the process of making this a better community. Look, I grew up on a historically black college campus where I got the opportunity, along with my one of six brothers and sisters in a family, where we got to see what it means to have black culture and pride and be associated with black excellence. So it was very important for us. And I guess I got to admit, too, I'm from New Orleans, so I have to say what high school I went to. And I went to a seminary in high school called St. John Prep, which is no longer in existence. After that, I went to Tulane and got my MBA and became a CPA. I moved to Denver, came back here to work with the Times-Picayune, and as a matter of fact, I was at Pepsi Cola in Denver, where I ran financial operations of the Rocky Mountain area. But I was excited to come back home because this is where I want to be, and this is where I want my kids to be. And I think it's so important that you create a culture that is not only equitable, but sustainable. And you deal with the systematic racism and issues that affect us and prevent us from becoming the best we can be as an institution. And as a single parent who raised three kids who are now 30, 28, and 24, I have a desire to have them stay and take care of me when I get older, to be honest with you. Even though I've taken all this stuff out of their bedrooms now and told them, you all are gone, it's an exercise room and a TV room. I also see my brother sitting in the crowd, and hopefully he will be clapping enthusiastically as we have this conversation going forward. But you know, it's important to us in the mission that we're on, and it's important that everyone understands that it's about all of us. It's not simply about a small segment of the community, but it's about raising all individuals in the community so they can have an equal opportunity to make us a better place. So that's a little bit about me.
Good. Terry, roots.
I'm a lifelong New Orleanian. I was born in Treme, raised in the 7th Ward in Gentilly. I moved back to the 7th Ward about 25 years ago. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. I had 4 brothers. 3 of them were in the restaurant business. 1 of them is a journalist. I got beat up a lot as a kid by my brothers. What David didn't say was they closed St. John Prep right after he left.
It is kind of true, yeah.
I worked at the Times-Picayune for 28 years, and then was called upon to become a part of this. It was exciting, plus I wasn't doing anything else. No, at this stage of my career, it seemed nice to be able to participate in something that has true meaning and to cover communities that I know we sort of missed the ball sometimes when we were at the Picayune. There were some communities that we just it didn't purposely ignore, but didn't try hard enough to cover.
Let's just take a half step back because we didn't identify really what this is. This
very
for
good
us is a digital news, nonprofit news organization that we, I should say they, in this instance, named happily, from my perspective, Verite. And Verite, the model is around, in this ever-changing landscape of news, around truth, facts, and fairness. That's the headline for the colleagues that David and Terry now are assembling. So what is Verite now in that context as you see it? As it launched, I want to say, 7-8 months ago, soft launch, as we say in media, and now is just getting really rolling. So
Verite is a nonprofit news organization that plans and have been covering, we have been covering issues that face communities that have been long ignored, who sort of feel left out of the mix, communities, it's a conversation Andy and I had a few weeks ago. They're sort of the communities in the city that are almost like separate cities because they face the challenges that all of New Orleanians face living here. But it's compounded because of their circumstances. They're poorer. They have to, there are folks struggling with housing, and if police response is slow in Lakeview and Uptown, imagine what it is in the East and the 7th Ward and the 9th Ward. So what we're trying to do is bring light to the inequities that these folks are facing.
And I'll also mention that we've been in the business for a very long time, and one of the challenges that the media has had over the years is bringing minorities into the journalism business. And so what we're attempting to do also is create fellowship programs, or we are creating fellowship programs, taking those seniors from historically black colleges and other universities and teach them in the art of being a journalist. It's not a newsroom. You're actually in the newsroom. It's not a school. It's a newsroom. So you're actually producing content such that you'll have the ability to present a portfolio to a potential media company as you go forward. And we also look at it this way. We know that there have been students who graduated but didn't get a chance to work with the smaller institutions because, quite frankly, if you look at the stats, you've got a newspaper closing every week since 2019 because of the financial pressures. So they're not getting the training they need. And I compare it to the baseball program. You get drafted out of college, they send you to the minor leagues to help polish you, and then you go to the major leagues. Well, we're that minor leagues in terms of getting them the skills that they need so they can go to the next level. And that's important to us because our goal is to be the most diverse newsroom in the state. And right now, it's over 2/3 of our newsroom leadership team are minorities, and 50% of our newsroom reporters are minority. So for us, we think that's an important piece because the lens in which you look at the facts in the community is affected by that. And having this type of voice allows for, I think, very robust conversation, a more deep understanding of the issues that individuals face, and allow us to present it to the community so the community better understands the challenges that we face. Because we face, like Terry was saying, you face different challenges based on the way you live in this community. So it's important for us to recognize the fact that we don't know it all, don't pretend to know it all, and half the time people think we are quite stupid about things, but that's okay. Because we want people to tell us what we don't know. And how do you formulate that so you can present a message that can be absorbed by those, even though it may be an uncomfortable message to share?
I would also add that this was born out of conversations that we all had, including my good friend and Verite managing editor, Tim Morris. When we were hiring folks. In the beginning, it was, well, first of all, you call somebody up and say, we start this thing, it's called Verite, and, we'd like to talk to you about possibly coming to work for us. And the first thing they said was, what the hell is verite? And who the hell are you? and you know, we sort of struggled in the beginning to reach out to people that we wanted to bring in because we were new, but also because it's hard to hire minorities in newsrooms around, you know, every publication in the country struggles with hiring minorities. And I think it was David who actually said, well, let's train them ourselves and bring them in, keep some of them, and then send them out to work in other newsrooms. And it's exciting to be able to, you know, be in a newsroom with experienced journalists and friends like Tim and David and Andy, and do this. That it's you know, there's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of conversations around that we make as far as the decisions that we make in this organization. But we hope to be a place that the Times-Picayune, the New York Times, the Clarion Ledger can come and hire minorities to work in their newsrooms and bring those perspectives to their newsroom.
So you've touched on a question that some of you I know, we talk about this question. You posed it once. What does the city of New Orleans gain by having a nonprofit news organization focused on disadvantaged communities? I hear that in ways that sometimes you think that's a bit naive question. But you mentioned sense of place and location and how tough it is to create a level of diversity in newsrooms around the country. This question about, but really, who are we talking about? Who needs this? Why is verite needed from a larger perspective in this community and for the people you want to serve?
Well, I was going to say, excuse me, it's kind of akin to, I look at it like a fire station. If you have the people in the fire station, if 50% of them aren't properly trained or don't have the resources or aren't given the mentorship to fully do their job, if your house is on fire and they come to save your house is going to burn. It's going to burn down. It's going to burn slowly, though. And that's kind of what we have here in the city. If you've got 50% of this population, or 54%, which is minority, and 30% or more are impoverished, you're not engaging a significant portion of your resources to become the economic sort of engine that you need to be to become a Houston or Atlanta of the world. And until you do that, your house is slowly burning down. And we believe in the culture. We know how unique the city is. We know why people come here in spite of what they hear about our murder rate, because they love the culture, they love the food, they love the way we deal with each other on a certain level out here. So that's important to us, and we have to recognize, how do you train those firemen, those firewomen to make sure we've got an equal level of experience and skill set so we can put the fire out with minimum damage out of it. So that's the kind of way I look at it.
Yeah. How have you reached out to these communities? Get a little more granular with your contact with who verite is reaching.
Well, I think you've got to consider the relationships that we have in the community. I'm part of several nonprofits. I was like past president of the Louisiana Press Association, Louisiana Daily Newspaper Association, organizations like the Children's Bureau, Institute of Mental Hygiene, which is really about mental health for children in the city. So we have those types of, and I'm on the Jazz Fest board, but that's all about party.
I was just going to say, you left out Jazz
That's a little bit
Fest.
different. That's all about the party, though. But I mean, so we're part of organizations like that, and then we also host what we call listening sessions. So we've gone around the city meeting with individual community members out here to understand what their concerns are. And it's kind of typical what you expect: crime. It is the image that an African-American male is presented in the media. It's the issue that people feel that they're being talked to but they're not talking about what their issues are and talking about how to help them. So we have these listening sessions to help us understand how we should formulate what we do to have an impact in the community. And I'll let you take it from there. A lot of stories that we've written at this point in sort of our short career that we're trying to do that.
I think also you should know that David and I are of this community as well. We don't, it's not just, it's easy to pay lip service to saying I'm going to cover this community or this community or, the black community, but we're of this community. So we have experienced racism in this community. No matter how many boards I've served on or the many that David has served on, when we're riding in the car together, we're still two black guys who, if we see a police car pull behind us, we're like, whoa, all right.
Slow down.
Cool, right?
Keep your hands on the wheel.
Right. But, there are communities that you don't think about that are disenfranchised. We just did a story, Rich Webster, who is with us from ProPublica, and Michael Isaac Stein, did a story on a community of musicians who struggle, local musicians who make their living playing on the streets of New Orleans. They sort of scrounge by for tips that you throw in the hat if you like them, and you don't if throw any money in the hat if you don't like them. We just did a story on the Royal Street Mall was, they removed the barricades, so these musicians are playing on Royal Street, and they, as Tim put it, they're dodging cars, and imagine blowing a trumpet and dodging cars. And after we did the story, the police brought barricades out. I think we're still trying to figure out if they're putting them in the right place where musicians won't be harmed or feel safe playing in the streets of New Orleans. But, there are many disenfranchised communities, and a lot of people don't think that musicians who play on the street are disenfranchised. Or, what has gentrification done to neighborhoods like the 7th Ward and Treme? I went on this site, and I was about to say I'm no longer on it, but I am, because it pisses me off, so I go to it to just get pissed off sometimes. And, but, there was one person who posted, who made a post, and in it she said, man, how can I get this kid who's playing his trumpet on his porch to stop doing this? This is a pain, But, if it wasn't for kids playing on their porch in Treme and the 7th Ward, there would be no Louis Armstrong, there would be no Trombone Shorty, there would be no Neville Brothers, and people are complaining about the things that make New Orleans special. Like, one other post was like, man, every time I go out my house, there's some impromptu parade going down some street in the Treme neighborhood. And that's, to me, you should have researched that before. You should know that this is New Orleans. And if somebody, we got people who can't play a trumpet that will march down the street and play a trumpet and be in his own little parade all alone by himself. But, but that's how the musicians who created jazz, my ancestors. I'm from a background of jazz musicians, restaurateurs, and shoemakers. And you know, New Orleans wouldn't be New Orleans without these communities.
Well, you bring to mind an essential when it comes to journalism, news as we know it, and community. And the word, generally speaking, I'm sure many of you think about this, and we see this in the age of disinformation and the struggles, particularly that young folks have, believing. Trust is the word that you hear most often. I don't trust them. I don't believe that group. I don't follow them. When you break it down the way you just did, how do you build trust coming from where you come from, knowing this audience, but at the same time, you're journalists, you're reporting. Sometimes it's bad news, it's rough news, it's difficult to feel you're being represented. How do you gain their trust?
You know, at first that's a great question, because at first that worried me. How would we do this? And in discussions with David and other newsroom leadership, I think what we found out is if you talk straight to people, and you got to imagine, a lot of media doesn't talk to people like in listening sessions and just out in the community and introducing ourselves and saying, hey, this is what we're trying to do. So I think if you look people in the eye and you talk to them, or we have a reporter who has a level of sincerity about writing something from the perspective of some New Orleanian who doesn't feel like they've been seen or noticed, and you wind up writing a story that resonates with them. Mm-hmm. You know, if they see the stuff we're doing, I think they begin to trust you. I think it's a process. I don't think anybody trusts anybody immediately, you know, nowadays. Mm. But I think the more time we spend out in communities, the more good, honest reporting that we do, the more we stick to the mission of what we founded Verite on. You know, we're not going out and chasing murder stories and fires mm-hmm. and carjackings. Mm-hmm. I don't want to put mugshots of young black men who were arrested, not convicted, on the website. I don't want to do that. I think that's the kind of stuff that people that makes people distrust you.
Yeah. So
but I want to add to that because I think it's important too. If every time I approached you, I was looking for something wrong within your community, if I was looking for the blemish, you won't want to approach me. You'll hide from me. And so what we're saying also, there are a lot of good things happening in these communities. Let's start recognizing those. You build a relationship then, and then they understand that what you're talking about is not about what they don't contribute. You're talking about how they do contribute, and then you're helping them become more engaged in the process. So I laugh when I tell some folks this, but if you went home every day to your spouse and you told them what was wrong with them, imagine how that household would feel, right? But if you went home and said, man, you are great, I love what you did. Matter of fact, can you help me do this? You'll get a little more cooperation. And it's the same thing. Let's talk about what we're doing right, what these communities are doing right, and highlight some of the people. So when they look, they see somebody who looks just like them. That's motivation. And then they can help you help them in the process. So you've got to be critical, but you also have to praise and recognize where the things are that go right in these communities. And I think we've fallen short traditionally. Media has done that, fallen short. We're saying you have to do that in combination with also criticizing certain things.
You know, when we were out in the community, the one thing that was common that everybody said was, every time the news covers us is because there was a murder in the neighborhood or a carjacking. Mm-hmm. or something like that. And they said, the media doesn't do real feel-good stories.
Yeah.
So, you know, Tim and I were talking early on in the beginning stages of this about how we could do that. So we started covering, you know, some really cool cultural events like, you know, Mardi Gras Indians, and those are a little more typical. Everybody does that too. But we hired some columnists who can speak to the issues that we can't intellectually speak to. You know, we hired Brandy Liberty, who is this Native American activist who is from a Louisiana tribe. I couldn't begin to pronounce it right now, but or her real last name I couldn't begin to pronounce. But you know, she's doing a column for us once a month. Her first column was about the relationship between Native American tribes in Louisiana and Mardi Gras Indians and how that developed. You know, we've got Dr. Robert Collins, a Dillard University political professor who's written some really good stuff explaining the you know, political issues in real time that the city is facing. Just a straight up explanation. There's this other woman, Fatima, what's Fatima's name? Fatima Sheikh, who, forgive me, don't ever tell her she's not here that I did that. But she writes a column for us once a month about the literary scene in New Orleans and in Black America. She wrote this incredible book, Economy Hall. And she's well respected among literary scholars and authors, and she contributes a column once a month. So, you know, we just sort of trying to reach out to everybody. We don't want to be just feel good, but we'd like you to sometimes feel good when you read us, you know, periodically.
This is always a tricky piece for news organizations, particularly ones that are evolving in a moment in time where many folks in your audience are getting their news from social media. They're getting it from TikTok. They're getting it from Twitter. They're getting it from Instagram. I see a smiling face in front of me right here. Where do you get your news from? Okay, we'll come back to that. But I understand that. So the question comes up for journalists working these beats and working on them as you are, is what's relevant to this audience? Where's the impact for them that can move the needle in their lives? That's how do you get your arms around that and deliver on it?
Well, I can tell you first of all, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I can tell you first of all, I had no idea how to tackle those things. I just truly learned about TikTok about a year ago.
Well, but fortunately, it may not be relevant another 6 months or
right.
so. Yeah. Who knows?
But I can tell you that our class of fellows, they know about TikTok. And they know about short videos and putting these things up that gets a younger audience's attention. We have an incredible audience person who works for us, and she's a comedian who spends a lot of time on TikTok, and Twitter, and she has a bunch of followers. On these sites, I'm mostly somebody who just kind of spies on other people and see what they're doing, and I never really post very much. I'll post some of our stories, but I think that's why diversity in the newsroom is important, and diversity in the newsroom as far as age is important. Because, I think David and Tim are true dinosaurs. And
All right, David, rebuttal.
right.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my chance on this. Hold on.
Hold on, I'm gonna talk for quite a long time. But I think we're dinosaurs, and we don't really know what we're doing in this on these platforms. But we have some young staffers that we could say, look, just don't embarrass us. Don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything that messes with the integrity of our mission. And just let us see what you're going to post. And it's usually some really cool
That
stuff.
last bit is an important part.
But there's something very important that I think also. The quality and the intensity of the journalism doesn't change. It's how you package it to the different audiences that you're trying to reach. So we know that a certain segment is only getting their news from social media. But within social media, it's Instagram, it's TikTok. So there are different ways to package that. So the story we may write that's 1,200 words, it's important that everybody has access to it. We're free and accessible information. That's important because you're writing to communities that don't always have the resources to subscribe. But in order to reach those communities, it has to be done in different formats. Some of our older generation, like Terry, would prefer to read it. Other generations prefer to see it as a visual component, being a video. So you have to figure out how to get that same information in such a way to these individuals that they want to go back and see the entire story, understand the entire message. And, in our newsroom, the nonprofit, the hierarchy is a little bit different. I mean, I sit right in the newsroom, and I'm sure Terry, Tim, Lottie, Charles would prefer me to work from home a lot.
Yep.
But there are a lot of conversations that we have, and part of that is to learn from each other and understand how we're consuming content as part of this process out here. So we are truly committed to quality journalism, deep investigative journalism, but if it's not read by across the demographics, then it's not having the impact you want. So how do you reframe it? And I think that's important too, because nonprofits were started by journalists, very good journalists who know how to write, who know how to communicate. But there's a lot of technical things. I mean, AJP is a big supporter of ours because it helps us work with a network with other nonprofits who are working through the digital challenges that you have in order to communicate this message effectively such that we get the results that we're looking for. So it's important that you understand that journalism is changing. Not the message, not the quality of the journalism. It's changing in the way you try to deliver it to the audiences that are looking for it.
Yeah.
The one thing we learned in 2012 when we were at the Picayune, and the Advance made the most asinine decision to go 3 days a week, and
You're going to really get us in trouble.
Now we get into juicy stuff.
I mean, it's not the Times-Picayune that is now. The Times-Picayune presently is 7 days a week. But when the Newhouse family owned it in 2012, we went to 3 days a week. But I can tell you the one thing we learned was, I was the page one editor for about 15 years at the Times-Picayune, during Katrina too. And we thought everybody was reading every word we put in the newspaper. I'm serious. Like
You were perfect on that front page, man.
yeah,
A lot of work together.
they read the front page.
Yeah.
But we thought that on the third page of the Metro section, that everybody was reading that story too, you know? And then when we moved to become more digital, we realized that they weren't reading all that stuff. You know, it was like, you truly understand that there are people out there who don't want to read a lot of stuff, And now this generation would really love to see a video and have somebody kind of tell them what it is. And I'm not going to lie, we have this new thing that you can listen to our stories. I listen to a lot of our stories.
David mentioned AJP. We just have a few minutes left and want to get to some questions you may have. AJP is the American Journalism Project, which is a national organization funded by some of the most thoughtful national foundations in the country, the Ford Foundation, Knight Foundation, Walton Foundations. So we have tremendous support at many different levels, but we come back to audience. And I want to ask this audience, any questions first for Terry and David?
Except
Come on,
for
Mark, be
him.
nice, except for him, right?
So can you tell me about your strategy for funding this new thing? What is it now, and what is your long-term future? Is there some sort of subscription model that you plan on dealing with, or do you plan on being just simply providing the content for people, and or do you plan on offering this to other newspapers, other websites to share what you're producing?
Want me to answer that?
Yep, that's you.
That's me. Okay, thanks, Mark. I think it's an important question because nonprofits, typically like ours, are started by significant donations from major foundations out here. But we know from a sustainability standpoint, there has to be more diversification within the funding models. So you have to be able to drive some revenue and sponsorships at the local level, along with you'll have to continue to consider the fact that larger foundations will be part of your revenue cycle. But events are also some of the things you have to do to raise monies associated with it. I would tell you there's some interesting nonprofits around the country. It's the Baltimore Baltimore Banner, where what they do is they have a model where they're covering various neighborhoods, and so the more impoverished the neighborhood, the content is free. At some level, as you look at more affluent neighborhoods, there's a small charge for a subscription. If you want the entire piece of their website content, you'll pay a price for it. But what they're recognizing is that information has to be shared with people, and don't let the barrier of economic ability prevent them from getting it. So they've made a structure along those lines. We don't have that in place. We're not really thinking about that at this point, but we do recognize that it's going to have to be a combination of not only national, regional, but also local funders and people just like you who we're counting on to support us as part of this process.
Ma'am, I think you were next.
Hi, Andy. We at the Lens have been, first let me say, all of that, what you're saying is not only very interesting, we've experienced it. We at the Lens have been winning awards now since Katrina in our investigative reporting. We have tried for almost 20 years to raise the money to hire minority reporters. And your editor and one reporter, by the way, were trained by us. You're very well funded, so I think you can do some of the things that we've been unable to do. But what do you suggest for those of us who are doing the hard work, and not that you aren't, but you know, our shelf of awards shows what we have been doing. It's very hard to raise that money these days. I know I wish we had your luck, but what do you suggest to those of us who don't?
It's a tough one.
Listen, absolutely.
And I appreciate the great work that the Lens has done. And you were here early and worked diligently and deserve the credit you've gotten in all those awards. It's a changing landscape on funding. Family foundations come in and come out. National foundations switch their focus. So there's no simple, straight, predictable response that I can give you other than the development of relationships, first here in New Orleans, which you have, and then at the broader level, at the regional level and the national level, similarly. I think I would say this, as it relates to all of us who are doing work in nonprofit. I see a big shift between journalism and democracy and connecting those two dots in a way that didn't exist when I entered this space a decade ago, where institutions now seem more fragile, seem more in peril almost daily. And that's where you've got to target if that area you feel you can penetrate and do some good work in, whatever cross-section, whether it's in social justice or criminal justice or housing, education, healthcare. There are usually audiences and money for very specific aspects of the work we do. And that's increasingly the way I look at it, at least. Peter, I think you were next.
Thank you very much. My name's Peter Little. Just a couple of comments and a question. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for bringing this important issue forward. I think we're all awestruck by the work you're doing and would love to support you as we can. Second, I'm, full disclosure, director of the Baldwin and Company Foundation, a new 501c3 that has just been created, the philanthropic partner of Baldwin and Co. bookstore, which you must, I suspect, know, gentlemen?
Yes,
you
great
probably
bookstore.
know of
It's
Baldwin
great.
and Co.
A lot of our early
Yeah.
meetings were held on the patio of the
Indeed,
Baldwin bookstore.
wonderful to hear. We're the immediate neighbor in the 7th Ward, and DJ Johnson, who's I thought going to be here, grew up in the 7th Ward, so many intersections, and it's really we envision it as a community uplift and empowerment platform disguised as a bookstore, and and your comment about training up a new generation of independent journalists, particularly from marginalized communities, rings a chord because we have, as you probably know, a fully equipped podcast studio that we are hoping and planning to deploy as a platform for training young podcasters who might not have access to the technology and the pedagogy and so on. So there's a conversation there I hope we could have in future. My question, sorry to be so long-winded, my question is, goes to the point you were making earlier about the mission of a nonprofit newsroom such as Verite. I'll distill it as how do you address the question of speaking truth to power? Speaking truth to power, beyond filling the gaps that exist in marginalized communities, such as the one you mentioned, Terry, particularly, you don't want to run mugshots of young black men who've been accused but not convicted of anything. You destroy lives by doing that. I totally applaud that editorial decision. Beyond that, beyond covering stories in the neighborhood that aren't well covered, to just balance the news coverage. How do you, as a new nonprofit, address the question of, let's just keep it in the subject of policing, addressing the abuses and misconduct that take place in, say, in the police department here? Now, a lot of that's well covered already in the opinion columns of the corporate media, the existing media, but what's the role of a nonprofit newsroom in boldly speaking truth to power? Do you really want to be out there provocatively challenging institutions and mindsets?
So I think it's a good question. First of all, I think you just have to do it. Mm-hmm. You have to realize, you have to build relationships with community leaders. Like we've been talking to the head of the police foundation. We talked to Dr. Ron Bailey, who is the head of LSU's psychiatric and mental health outfits. And what we're trying to do is coalesce all of these relationships to understand where we can write the stories and how we can write the stories that are gonna resonate with the communities we want to cover. And our goal is to do stories to shed light on the inequities that New Orleans East faces in just its geography, compared to where New Orleans proper is. And what does that mean? It's, they have a hospital, but what does it mean for, it's not a huge hospital, but what does it mean for somebody who's a heart patient and the best specialists are at Oxnard and such? I think what you just have to do is do it. You have to talk to folks, find out the issues that they're facing, and be a voice for those people. You just have to go out and do it.
I think we got time for just one more question, because
Okay.
the old television producer and me, the clock on the wall is
blinking red light.
flashing red, and it doesn't feel really like it's going to forgive us on this one. But I'm so glad you came to the mic here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for this great discussion, and going back to the social media point first and foremost. I think social media is definitely like a jumping off point is what I wanted to say. So in terms of like when doing a research paper in school, they tell you, don't use Wikipedia as a resource. Like as one of your main sources, you can use it to start and then go find other sources from there. I think that's kind of where social media plays a role, because I find myself on Instagram like following NOLA.com and then finding like their articles being posted and then going to the website and reading more about it. So I think in terms of social media, that's what the role is. And then my question is, you were talking a lot about like the rich culture that is obviously like a huge draw for people to come to New Orleans. I was wondering what your thoughts were on like the culture, and you were talking about the music, people playing in the streets, and being commodified, and how that plays a role when you're writing stories or in the community itself.
Good question. 1 minute, sir.
I think I understand your question, but I was in the quarter recently. It might have been with you. We weren't at a bar. And
Hadn't gotten there yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But I saw this parade going down Decatur, and it was this band that I had no recognition of, and this group of about 40 people behind them, dancing with umbrellas, fairly rhythmless. Not that I would be much better, but it just kind of, when I see stuff like that, it hurts me a little bit, because I remember being a kid in Treme, and then which is the 6th Ward and the 7th Ward, and knowing where those second lines came from. A lot of them started as jazz funerals, marching behind jazz funerals. And now it's this commercial kind of crap that as a tourist you could come in and buy a parade. That shit ain't fair.
10 seconds, I promise.
10 seconds, you got it.
Thank you. G. Nathan, I have a digital thing and a radio show on WBOK since 2014, paying for it out of my Social Security check and paying for my staff and everything. What we need, generally speaking, in news is less was and more what might be. More future, less yesterday. And even this festival, as I looked at the listings, yours was one of the few sessions I wanted to come to, because I want to learn about how to develop digital media better. Okay, and then finally, Terry, you're right. You guys have been noticed, trying to give more substantive news, not just feel-good stuff, but important economic development. So economic and cultural development. Culture is a big part of our future economic development here, and I'm trying to help people understand that. We're not there yet, but it would help if we had less shootings in sports and more economic and cultural development. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you very much.
Can I say one final thing?
Yeah, please.
He's going to kill us, man.
If-
He's going to
if-
absolutely
if-
kill us.
can-
Don't get off the stage.
All of you can go to Verite News and sign up for the newsletter and subscribe. veritenews.org. I just had to say.
Subscribe means
Thank you.
sign up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.